Friday.
Here we go.
And we're live. Hello everyone. This is Irene with SaugaTalks, and Irene here with Brian every Friday. Brian from Coruzant Technologies. Brian, how are you doing?
I'm doing fabulous. Again, I'm starting to get up earlier and earlier every Friday because we always have these awesome guests on the show. And of course, we're going to get into that very shortly, but my day's fabulous and I can't wait till we get started.
I know the feeling of anticipation, Brian. I know exactly what you mean because this is the way to start and continue with your Friday. I'm with you. And today we have a fantastic guest. So Hema Lakkaraju, if I'm not butchering your name, Hema, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing good. Awesome. And hi, Irene. Hi, Brian. And hi to all the audience on the LinkedIn. So today we are going to have an awesome talk. And it would be intriguing, it would be smart, but it would be fun at the same time.
Absolutely, Hema. So the reason we wanted to talk to you about digital health and maybe health tech trends that you see developing in front of our eyes, because we are bombarded with different resources and different angles from consumer side, from provider side, from technology and from industry side, right? Mm-hmm. Could you please spill some gems of brilliance here and bring some clarity? I did link few publications that you, Hema, posted lately, okay, on the topic, and of course our audience can go and learn in details about those points. But yeah, could you please open up with where do you see digital health is leading us this year?
Yeah, so let's start off with an interesting story, right? So interesting story, the story of 3 gold boxes. So there was an organization who had 3 gold boxes, imagine. And if you ask anybody, there is one person who thinks this from a system side and say, because this is from this system or from healthcare or from fintech, it's of primary importance. Another person who thinks it from a team side, he says, hey, this is from my team, from my department, from my R&D, so it is important. Another person thinks it from a data side. They think, hey, I have to open the box and see what exactly is in it. And then, depends upon that, I will decide whether is that gold box really worthy. So that is the whole concept where we are going in terms of healthcare. The pandemic have opened so much of innovation opportunities for the world around, and everybody think that the technology is the final answer. It's partially true, but not entirely true. So as we are going in this fast pace of creating more golden boxes and different people having more definition of what is important, the technology, the integration in the healthcare is increasing. But at the same time, there is a fascinating thing that's happening in the market right now. You will see the strategical partnerships that's happening between a fintech and a complete tech world. You are seeing a combination of partnerships between a health tech and the fintech world. So eventually, in the next 5 to 10 years, we will see a industry which is not completely fintech or not completely health tech, but it would be a consumer centric or consumer tech industry where consumer would be at the center point and the health tech, fintech, and all these technologies would be connected to the consumer. And that's the reason why we see this heavy mergers and acquisitions between a big tech company who have the personal information of the customer buying a health tech company which have the health information of the customer. So it's eventually it's about how fully I can create a customer profile, and it would be a complete merger of these technologies in the next 5 to 10 years. And it would be a fascinating but intriguing ride for all of us to observe.
That's awesome. Hema, I appreciate your perspective on that. And truly, I think we're moving faster. I know you say 5 to 10 years. I think it'll be a little bit faster, just the way things have been going. Mm-hmm. But you're absolutely right. It's moving to a consumer-concentric market. And as you recently saw how Apple and Amazon and others, some of the big tech companies have jumped into the healthcare space because they also see the problem with healthcare. It seems like healthcare should be on the forefront of technology and streamlining it, right? Because we're impacting, the health or the lives of people, and that's certainly important. And we're seeing certainly a transformation, especially out of this pandemic. Everything has just accelerated like crazy. But you're absolutely right. I think we're erasing those lines between verticals, and we're going to start to see more of consumer-centric driven economy and product lines. It's just how it is. So thank you for sharing that, Hema.
Thank you. Yeah. Any questions for me, Irene, on that follow-up?
Always, yes. So in this format, we're alternating. So Brian brings his angle to conversation and asking you questions, yes, and then I step in. Absolutely, Hema. Yeah. So I'm fascinated with consumer data. Okay, because we know all the devices collecting that data, right? We know IoT, smartwatches, and it seemed to be consumers loving to play that game.
Yeah.
To me, the best way to adapt the technology is really to feel people part of something bigger and something exciting. So where do you see this consumer data health tech bringing us? Because again, everybody seems to be part of it now.
Yeah, I think we will again see a big trend. We are seeing already where, if you look at the history of the healthcare industry, it has been what we call as payers, providers, and patients. So we actually started, if you look at the healthcare industry from the beginning, we actually started from a provider centric where doctor have the final authority of the patient data and so on, starting from the Egyptians' time, right, to now in the mid of 70s to 80s, where the provider, where the payers, the insurance companies have the control over the healthcare data. Now we are transforming into what we called as a patient-centric data. So patient-centric control. Now the customers want to have the control over their data. And that is what it's transforming into. And as the customers realize it much more bigger and realize it much more intriguing, that they really need that data, they really want to control that data, it will transform the industry into much more of digital health apps, much more of preventive, much more of the digital health platforms where it will give the customer the control over the data. We have seen again a tremendous amount of startups in the blockchain kind of a technology for health, meaning they are creating this bitcoins kind of thing for health information, where the patient have that Bitcoin kind of a technology, and the patient or the customer will decide where the data will go, whether it will go to the doctor, whether it will go to the payer, whether it will go to a digital platform. So it's again, as Brian and we were discussing, it is a combination. We are seeing a merger of technologies into the healthcare era. So it's no longer would be a health tech, but it would be a complete digitalization and privatization and personalization of health tech in the next few years. And what it means that we will see a rise of what we call as a precision medicine and precision health, meaning we will use these technologies first to create the patient profile, and next we will use these again combination of AI, machine learning, quantum computing, data analytics, all these things, IoT, and we will create what we call as a customized healthcare for the patient or for the customer. And we are seeing that the customers want more and more kind of this personal touch to their healthcare, to customized healthcare. And that's where we will be going in the next few years for sure.
You're absolutely right, Hema. Something I want to talk about, it's been very prevalent, obviously, in the news and the media, is this thing about privacy. And, we were recently talking on this show, Irene, with another guest of ours, Tomas Swoboda, around blockchain technology. And so, as you mentioned, the crypto, right? So blockchain has entered the healthcare space. We have several use cases already today. But what's really cool, and we've been talking about it for years, I've been in healthcare a long time on the tech side, but having the patients in charge of their own healthcare data is really where it needs to be. It makes it safer, it's more transparent, but having a blockchain technology built around healthcare where it allows the patient to have full control of their medical record and be able to share it, knowing that there is some sort of digital ledger that's going to be there forever, right? That they'll be able to control and see who's looking at their data and where it's been shared. So I think you're absolutely right on that. The technology is converging like nobody's business today. It's amazing. So again, appreciate the share, and I'm sure Irene has a follow-up on that as well. Thank you.
Oh yeah, you know what? To me, the big elephant in the room, at least the part of the universe I'm in, it's AI. AI in healthcare, okay? We cannot not touch it in this conversation. So, Hema, where do you see the most prevalent use cases nowadays? Because again, we can enhance humans, right? We can enhance doctors. We can improve consumer data insights, right? But what is really practical in 2021?
Yeah, so there has been a recent by European Commission on AI ethics and development of AI ethic guidance. It has been just few days back where they have released the document, and it talks about very powerful implementation of AI from healthcare to fintech and so on. But it is when it comes to healthcare, the adaptation of AI is challenged by one core principle, which is privacy. So again, it's partially understood but not completely. Just imagine that AI is a tool. I can use it to shape my healthcare into a smarter healthcare ecosystem where I can automate the data analytics, where I can do the data sorting, where I can create a customized healthcare what the patient actually want. But at the same time, AI, when it's combined to autonomy, where autonomy basically stands as the free to act and take decisions by itself, that is where the healthcare um, industry is not able to adapt AI as fast because they are concerned about the autonomy, free will to act. Free will to act meaning when it comes to autonomy, it can take a life and death situations and life and death decisions for a patient, which is usually taken by a very skilled doctor or a physician at present. So it takes a humongous amount of work to have that combination of AI with making that autonomy and autonomical aspects of it into a much more viable thing. So if we can combine, we can still leverage the AI, but we can take the process of autonomy from slowly from a combination of the decisions from a physician to the machine learning, where eventually in the next few years, machine learning will become so good by the intake of the data from the patients, physicians, and so on into taking it decisions by itself. I think that would be an amazing point. But the adaptation in the healthcare industry of AI should not be restricted because again, it's a dual-edged sword, and it can automate a lot of big challenges that we have, meaning especially in the big data point of view in healthcare, where we are collecting right now during the pandemic. You will see a big rise of digital health apps, of digital platforms, about of IoT devices. And as we are creating more technologies, as the patients and customers are giving more data to all these apps and technology and devices, it's creating what we call as a big data. But how much of that big data is actually useful? So that's where AI can come into place, where it can sort the data, it can analyze the data and say that, hey, from this big data, this is actually the smart data that really matters. And that is where some of the aspects of AI can come into place. So it's truly understanding the technology of AI and truly understanding where it can be placed at the right position in the healthcare process, where we can take the maximum leverage. I think that the situation right now is not how we can create a digital healthcare ecosystem, but the question now is to create how we can create a smart and personalized healthcare ecosystem, and that's where the adaptation of the technologies at the appropriate stages comes into place.
You're absolutely right. Hema, you're spot on with healthcare, and this is a topic I really am passionate about as the healthcare space. As you know, my background in healthcare,
Yeah.
but AI today is come a long way, but until we can get probably some more governance, right? You're in that space as well, governance and some parameters around how we leverage AI in healthcare. It's important because there's an ethical piece to this.
Yes.
But you're absolutely right. We need to leverage it. We're seeing use cases all across the healthcare spectrum. Radiologists, I know radiologists aren't going to want to hear this, but I honestly think in the next 5 to 10 years that radiologists will be obsolete.
Yeah.
They're using it in several use cases now where machine learning is actually doing a much more accurate job of reading these exams, right? These images, and that's a game changer right there. Obviously, we need to always keep in mind we got to have it's a human and machine team here. It's not just one or the other, and I don't think that'll ever go away. But I think as we move further into the future in the next 5 years or so, we're going to definitely see uh, the human side of it thing. Job or function move into a different type of role for sure. So thank you for sharing that, Hema. Irene?
Yeah, so what I hear here from you is that not leveraging AI is a huge mistake. Right? We beyond that point, right? At the same time, you talk a lot about ethical by design,
Yeah.
okay? Because I do want to hear about some of the soft points in a way that consumers are not aware what data being collected, what data is being analyzed. So again, it's all this privacy and governance issue. If I sense it correctly, how do we look forward that we're optimistic about innovation and not necessarily paranoid, with all the technological challenges it brings?
Yeah. So let's jump into when it comes to the ethics, there is a two-way street. One, what the organization is communicating to the customer or the patient, and two, what patient or the customer is really understanding what data is being collected, right? So we are talking about, if you look at the AI like a big bubble, inside the AI, the perfect model of the high technology healthcare AI would be in like a three circle bubble, where the big bubble is AI. Inside the big bubble, there is a small bubble called EI, ethical intelligence. And inside that ethical intelligence, what brings the ethical intelligence into picture and implementation is what we call as a data intelligence. That's where the importance of it comes into place. So when we talk about ethical intelligence, meaning yes, we have to use AI to adapt and to create the smarter healthcare ecosystem. But in order to make it so that it's a win-win, we are still considering the privacy and security into place. You need the concept of ethical intelligence. Out of this much data, what data is actually of value? What data is the sensitive data that can in the situation where it can happen, a data breach would impact the customer. Right now, the problem is when you go to the organizations, they are only looking from a system centric point of view. They're not looking from a data centric point of view. Once you look from a data centric point of view and you say, sit and question, have a round table with your compliance leaders, with your developers, and sit and understand the whole design of an app, for example. What kind of data are we collecting? Out of this much of collection of data sets, what is the most sensitive data? With whom are we sharing? The third party vendors comes into picture. Are we using a third party vendor for processing that information, sensitive information? If yes, what controls do they have? And that is where ethics come. Why are the patients or the customer using your digital health app? Because they trust you. And when you bring in that ethical intelligence and tailor it and create a privacy by design and security by design digital healthcare app or platform, you are not only just clicking the checklist for a compliance of a standard, but you're actually making a value proposition to the customer. And the organizations should start thinking like that, saying that if I include my ethical intelligence, which comes from my data intelligence, and I tailor it in the privacy by design and security by design, I'm creating a competitive advantage for myself because I'm saying, hey, I'm proactively designing it with the privacy and security in mind. So you can trust us more compared to the competitor X or Y. And once the organizations start to think from that perspective, it would be an amazing, profitable business for them, but also they are already in compliant with the regulations. Coming from the customer point of view, the customer have no idea how long is the consent. Let's be frank with you, right? So if you're signing a consent form while adapting a digital healthcare app, how long is the consent? Do you actually understand what part of the consent that you're doing it? So it's about no, right? So it's
Mhm.
about what really matters and how you can tell it. For example, in a bullet points, I do remember during the pandemic, Emirates Airlines created this pop-up privacy consent, very simple and effective. It said, if you say yes, this data sets would be collected. If you say partially yes, this data sets would be collected. If you say no, then this would be the impact and there would be no data sets collected. So it should be a very clear cut communication to the
Mhm.
customer. And that's very important. So it's a two-way street. There is a lot of learning from for customers to understand, hey, why I'm using this data, why I'm using this digital health app, at what stake, in return what I'm giving you. For example, if I come to you and say, I'm going to give you a box of wine, I need your full name, where do you stay, and your date of birth. You would most probably deny that rack of wine, right? But right now, if I give you a health app and say, hey, it's fun, but in the meanwhile, we will just collect your personal information. We don't even think for a second.
Mhm.
So you have to think it from that point of view. What's at stake from a customer if you're a user in return of that free app or thing? And is it really worth doing? So it's a self-realization and assessment from a customer side. From an organization side, again, it's about what value and how you want to build the trust to the customer. And that's what audit is. Yeah.
That's awesome. Hema, I appreciate you sharing and you being in the life sciences industry. But I did want to ask you one question around, you're in risk compliance governance. What is your biggest challenge that you see coming down the line? Because there is a lot of this uh, consumerization of whether it's an app or a product or service. Everything is really coming together, and literally people are going to eventually probably have their phone surgically inserted into their head. The way these things are so prevalent. But
Yeah.
what are the challenges you're starting to see, and you can see something on the horizon? Anything you could share on that?
Sure. I think there are two big challenges that we will have. One is the rise of customer profile creation. The companies will know more about you than you know about yourself. And the mergers and acquisitions of the health tech with the big tech companies and
Hmm.
the big tech companies like Amazon coming into healthcare is basically filling that gap and creating the complete customer profile, not only from your personal side, but also from the health side, which means it would be one centralized location of your healthcare data profiling, which means there is a lot of accountability for that organization. And if we see more of those mergers and acquisitions, then there's a big question about, do me as a user actually have my right to get my data from that big tech companies, right? Because they have a complete profile of me.
Hmm.
I don't know anything much
Yeah.
about me than they do have. So we say it as a health protectism or profile protectism, and profile protectism will become a bigger challenge moving on. The second bigger challenge that we will have is as we again create and merge these multiple technologies of IoT, MedTech, digital health app, and creating this ecosystem, health ecosystem for the customer. There is no clue about who is accountable for the patient data and at what stage. there would be one app who is collecting the data. There would be another third party vendor who would be processing the data. There would be a cloud service who would be archiving the data and storing the data. So if you look at from a system centric point of view, there would be of no use if you are trying to put a guidance or a regulatory standard from a system point of view, because it would no longer make sense in the next few years, or at least starting now, because as more and more integrations happen, more and more mergers happen, there will be only one core foundation on which the regulations need to be designed, that would be on terms of data. And if you follow from a data lifecycle point of view, that would be amazing. I'm actually an advisor in datacollaboration.org, and we have a bunch of advisors coming from fintech, health tech, from education sector. And all we talk and try to design is about how we can not think about systems, but think about the core that defines a system or an app, its importance, which is data, and the data centricity and data uh, free. It's access to the data, not having copies at multiple systems. And that is where we can bring in more privacy and security into place, where your data, customer data, is not sprawling around multiple systems and network, not having clue where my data is, but having one centralized location and having that access and having that control to the patient, who is the sole, have the sole right to their information. I think that would be the much more better aspect of it.
Yohime, centralized location, centralized data, that's to me like a center, listen to that, centralized center, of the whole conversation, because we know healthcare is one of the most conservative industries, at least here in the States. So how do people embrace, because again, I started my career in tech here in health insurance company years ago, many years ago. And I remember even back then, and now I don't think it's changing, because when you're changing life critical processes, mission critical operations, okay, let's not forget it's a thriving multi-billion-dollar industry that's somewhat reluctant in many cases. So as entrepreneur yourself, where do you see this sweet spot for the startups to gain traction, but at the same time to transform the industry on their own pace? Otherwise, right, we're risking to ruin things that work.
Yeah, I think for any startups and the founders who are trying to make a big mark, or trying to see the healthcare industry, or trying to make the transformation and disrupt the healthcare industry, I think the data centric and managing the healthcare data is a next big billion-dollar industry. And we see some startups trying to create a platform where the patient can bring in the data from multiple systems and platforms and put it at one spot. That's there. But now the challenge is how to transform this huge among those big data in healthcare industry into the data of real value, meaning parsing the signal from the noise, taking what actually is of value from this whole big data. And if we still talk about big data in healthcare, how to manage big data, I think that is not a next billion-dollar industry. The next billion-dollar industry would be how to analyze that big data and take the data of value from the big data, which is a smart data. And that would be a big billion-dollar industry. I think only some people able to understand the value of it. We will see more moving forward, but I think that would be a big for startups. For organizations, whether it's mid or bigger organizations who are in this race of creating these strategical partnerships with multiple organizations, trying to create an ecosystem for the patients, try to understand not from a system centric point of view, from a data centric point of view, because the real trust, the real profit for the business is gaining the trust from the customer. And once we get a reputation about not considering the customer privacy, it is really hard back to get into a good reputation. I think that would be, again, a billion-dollar industry moving forward for the healthcare would be how to transform these huge data chunks into a smart data. And that's what the whole value is moving forward.
You summarized that very well. Hema, and I certainly appreciate that. And I know that we're getting close to our time, and so I'm not here to steal anybody's thunder, but we're gonna kick it over to Irene, and she usually has a kind of a wrap-up question.
The wrap-up question, Hemo, for you. I love to leave our audiences with takeaways, okay? Because we covered a lot of grounds in this exciting conversation. So, Hema, a few points, okay? 1, 2, 3 points that you think are important for the audience to take forward. Mm-hmm.
Sure. Hey, for the healthcare industry, customers and patients, think about double think, triple think while you're trying to use a digital app or something, and what in return are you actually giving? Are you giving too much of sensitive information? For the organizations, whether it's startup or bigger organizations who want to really make a mark in the healthcare, hey, the next billion-dollar industry would be how to transform this big data, huge chunks that we have right now, analyze it and parse it into a smart data. And the third point is the privacy and security by design. The whole concept come out of starting with policies and procedures in terms of compliance, risk, and governance for an organization. Privacy by design, security by design, your product talks by itself. And if you focus more on how to create those privacy and security in the design of the product, you might not need those many policies and procedures. And that talks and gives you a competitive and business advantage in the market, rather than just going the traditional way.
Fantastic, Hema. Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
very
you.
much for your time. Thank you, Brian. Fantastic session today. I appreciate it.
Awesome.